In her work, she studies how people and companies can create abundance, fulfillment, meaning, and vitality in their work. Tracy is also a Calvin business partner. She's already sponsored 2 CAP projects here at Calvin. You may have actually seen a picture of her in that video. And our students love working with her and working for her. Her recent book, Bring Work to Life by Bringing Life to Work, a guide for leaders and organizations, provides new perspectives on work-life balance and how to create abundance and fulfillment in work and life. She will be available to sign copies of her book after the event. You will, right? I didn't ask her before. I said you would. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tracy Brower.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I have to tell you that I'm a huge Calvin fan. Working with Bob and the students, actually getting to know Calvin for the first time when we came with our daughter for a visit. I've just really fallen in love with Calvin in so many ways and at so many levels. So thank you for having me. I also have to give you a quick caveat that everything that I share, the views are my own and not necessarily the views of the groups or associations or organizations that I'm associated with. So let me tell you a little bit about where this started. When I went back to school for the 3rd time, our son was 5, and he said to his Sunday school class, "My mom's going back to school again because she didn't get it right the first time," which I loved. Our daughter was old enough at the time to invite me into the obligatory first day of school photo, and my husband snapped the picture. When I was studying for my comps, my mom came over and made me peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It was a family affair. But I looked at all of the work-life balance research, and I didn't think it described the event, the experience, effectively. It felt like it was the wrong paradigm to use, because it was always about trade-off. It was about there was never enough. It was about finding this equilibrium between work and life, and there was never enough to go around. So I thought there was probably a better paradigm, something more about abundance and fulfillment, something more about work and life being integrated, something more about work and life coming together, and a starting point of abundance and fulfillment that would allow us to still set boundaries between work and life, but to really find a way to integrate them as well. So I started exploring that a little bit. And I want to talk to you a little bit today about ideas I've got around bringing work to life and some ways that we can think about that a little bit differently. I don't have all the answers, but these are some of the things that I'm starting to think about. So our daughter is now a senior in high school, and she's looking at applying to colleges. And so she came across this question in the process of college applications. One of the college applications asked, "What is your favorite word and why?" And I got to thinking that that's kind of an interesting question. And I was thinking about my favorite words and why. And so I wanted to share with you some words today that I think are interesting. Because words are really important. They shape how we think about things, and therefore they shape our experiences and our lives. So I've got some words to share with you today that I think are sort of interesting. I want to talk a little bit about perspective, purpose, passion, people, and finally, planting trees. First of all, let's talk about perspective. When I was doing my PhD program, I did some really fascinating research around spillover and stress. Since 1972, we've been doing this thing called the General Social Survey across all of the nation. And we've been asking people, to what extent does your job spill over into your family and your family into your job? We've been asking this question since 1972. Like, this work-life thing feels like a relatively recent discussion, but it's actually not. It's actually been something that we've been curious about for a while. And the majority of people experience a negative spillover between those two things, job and family. And then there's all this research about stress. Whether you look at the AMA or the APA or the ASA, pick your organization, stress is rampant. No matter our gender, no matter our generation, no matter whether we're married or not, no matter whether we have children or not, we tend to be experiencing a lot of stress with our work. So we just don't have it figured out completely yet. This is one of the words I want to share with you. This is the word karoshi. In Japanese, it means death from overwork. Oh my gosh, right? American audiences usually giggle a little bit at the term. The scary thing is that it's actually a diagnosis in Japan. People are in hospitals on their deathbeds, and this is their diagnosis, because they've worked so hard and they haven't necessarily found a way to integrate successfully. So we don't have it all figured out quite yet. Here's a provocative statement. There's no such thing as meaningful work. A lot of people kind of scrunch up their noses and wonder what I'm talking about, but I think we can think about it a little bit differently. Let me tell you more. So, in the English language, we have these words take and bring, and we often use them ineffectively. Take means from the speaker, bring means to the speaker. And so I think there's something about a perspective where we're bringing meaning to our work. We're bringing life to work. And so I think perspective matters, and this is one way to think about it. Here's another way to think about perspective. This is a Shiba Inu puppy looking at its shadow. Holy cow, I'm Batman. So it's all about perspective. Here's another one on perspective. This is the turtle on his back looking at the sky saying, oh my gosh, I'm flying. So I think perspective matters, and I think it has some relationship to work and life. So here's another word for you to consider. We talked about karoshi, death from overwork. This is arbeidsglede, which is Danish for happiness at work. And I think it's a place where we can start with this idea of happiness and abundance and fulfillment. And I think when we start with the assumption that we can have those, create them as leaders, create them in our organizations, we get to different ending points when we have a different starting point. And Calvin gives us a context for spirituality. It gives us a context to have some different kinds of conversations. So I like this from 1 Corinthians. Whatever you do, do it for the glory of God. What if we start with glory and positivity as a way to think about work life? So there are 3 ways that I think we can bring abundance and fulfillment to work and life. The first is purpose. So have any of you heard about this thing called blue zones? Okay, cool, this is fresh. So blue zones are places across the globe where people live to ridiculously long ages in amazingly good health as very happy people. And so there are all these books on blue zones. There are a few different versions of these books on blue zones. And so the really interesting thing is, why is this happening? What's happening in those communities that causes these conditions to occur? And one of the most important things is a sense of purpose. Ikigai is a word that means a reason to wake up in the morning. Okinawa is the tiniest island. If you Google it, you will have a hard time seeing its shape because it's so small that it's always under the dot that shows where it's located. And Okinawa is one of the places that's a blue zone. And so this is a word that's important in Okinawa. Ikigai means a reason to wake up in the morning. It's our purpose. It's our reason for being around. And it's one of the ways that we create abundance and fulfillment when we have this reason to wake up in the morning. So that's one perspective on purpose. We all want to build cathedrals, not just lay bricks. And people will statistically choose meaning over salary. Most people in most situations will choose to have a job that's got great meaning and purpose, where they feel like they're aligned with what they want to do in kind of the big picture, over a job where they just make lots of money and it might not be so rewarding. And so we all want to build cathedrals, not just lay bricks. There's something about feeling connected to something that's bigger than ourselves when we think about creating this idea of abundance and fulfillment and bringing work to life. So I was doing some research on work, and I was really curious about different perspectives. So I went to a 5th grade classroom and a high school classroom and a college room, and we talked to plenty of working adults, and we talked to older generations. And we had this honor to go to a 5th grade classroom. Ooh, that was really cool. We asked questions about, what is the meaning of work? How do you think about work? What do your parents do for a living? What do mom and dad talk about at home? In fact, we asked the question, do any of your parents ever feel annoyed or frustrated with their work? And of course, every hand in the room went up, and they were really eager to tell us some stories, which we were really wanting to hear. It was exciting. So Luke told us a story. I really enjoyed this. Luke told us a story, and he said, you know, that his mom and dad argued quite a bit at the dinner table, so he was going to be an attorney because he thought he was pretty good at negotiating and arbitrating. So we had some fun with it. So this was pretty cool, though. We were asking the kids about what their families did and what work meant. And little Alexis raises her hand. And her mom and dad own a heating and cooling company. And so we asked Alexis, well, you know, what do you do? And she said, well, we provide comfort and heat for families. Oh, isn't that great? That feels like purpose. My more jaded colleagues are like, yeah, Tracy, she's just got the tagline down. But the angels were singing for me, right? It felt like she had a really good sense of purpose, and this is something they talk about at home, and that means something to them. They're not just fixing furnaces or installing air conditioners. They're providing heat and comfort for families. That feels like a pretty big deal. That feels like something worth doing. Here's another example. There's a gentleman I know who works on an assembly line, and he makes this really super special tiny little part. And this really super special tiny little part goes into a mechanism. And the mechanism goes into a crank. And the crank goes into a hospital bed, and it's used to turn the bed so patients don't get bed sores or gangrene, and so they can be more healthy and get home to their families. That's a really big deal, right? That's purpose. It's like this idea of laddering up, that every job has dignity, and all the work that we do has dignity. And as business leaders and people who affect those around you, you have this great opportunity to communicate vision and to help people feel connected from whatever they do, all work having dignity, up to this idea of whatever that bigger picture is. So whatever we do has a lot to do with our abundance and fulfillment when we feel connected. So I think the first part of creating abundance and fulfillment and bringing work to life is about cultivating a reason to wake up in the morning. It's this idea of ikigai. So we talked about changing perspective and we talked about purpose. Let's talk a minute about passion. And there's a word I want to talk about here, which is yada. Anybody watch Seinfeld? Not all audiences are old enough to remember Seinfeld, but some of us are. And some of us learned the word yada originally on Seinfeld. Yada is a Hebrew word which means to know and to do. But here's the cool thing about yada. Yada is about the intertwining of these concepts. It's the idea that if we really know something, we must do it. And if we're not doing it, we don't really know it. So like this, if I know I should wear my seatbelt, but I don't wear my seatbelt, I don't really know that thing deeply. Or if I know I should eat my vegetables because my mother reminds me regularly, but I don't always eat my vegetables as well as I should, then I don't deeply know that thing. It's the idea that we are known by our actions and our choices, and the idea that those things are utterly intertwined. There was a leader I worked with many years ago who used to say, "You're behaving so loudly, I can hardly hear what you're saying." I think this is about us living our passion, about the desire for each of us to kind of know and do, and that when we are really aligned with what we love to do, that is a good thing and that helps us create abundance and fulfillment. So this idea of really behaving in concert with who we are, and the choices we make telling a really important story about who we are and what we value. I know this CEO at a company locally, and he has a grandson who plays soccer. And he loved to go to his grandson's soccer games on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons in the middle of the day. And he used to kind of sneak out, right? Because he didn't want people to feel like he wasn't committed to the company because he was the CEO after all. And finally, someone pulled him aside and said, "You should be really open with the fact that you're going to these soccer games regularly, because it says something really important about how you value work and life, how all of the parts of you are important, and therefore it will give permission to other people in the organization to be able to bring their full selves to life and to work as well." So I thought that was kind of a cool story about all these choices we make. Our leadership is inevitable. The choices we make send strong messages and cues to people, because the number one way that we learn is through watching other people, because we're fundamentally wired for connections. And so when we see the choices people make around us, they impact on the choices we feel like we can make. So we behave loudly toward our passions. There's another really interesting study that's been done since 1995 across 7 countries, multiple genders and multiple kinds of work. And the study asks people, if you won the lottery, would you still work? And between 59 and 93% of people say yes, they would still work. They might not do precisely what they do today, like if I could do a few less expense reports, that would be a good thing. But they would do something. They would want to make a difference. And so we want to work. There's an incredible book called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. If you haven't introduced yourself to Atul Gawande, I would go out and buy every book he's written. I've read them all, and he's incredible. Richard Address is another one that I love. He wrote a book called Seekers of Meaning. Both Gawande and Address make the case that work is a really important part of our identities, right? Like, we want to work. One of the worst things that we can do to people is say, no, we're good. We don't need your help, we're good here. Because work gives us a sense of identity. It's a way that we can express who we are, what we care about, and our gifts in the world. There is such a thing also as death from underwork, according to Gawande and Address. So here's one from Ecclesiastes. Whatever you do, do it well. There's an opportunity for us to express our passion, and when we're doing that, we're really able to create more abundance. So I have a friend, Tom, and he says, Tracy, purpose and passion, these are big deal. These are heady. I don't know my purpose. I don't know my passion. How do I figure those out in one lifetime? He says, the way I think about it is I just figure out what I'm good at, and I do that. So that feels pretty elegantly simple to me. I like that. Figure out what you're good at and do that. And that is the way to take the path of passion toward bringing work to life. So we've talked about changing perspective, we've talked about purpose, we've talked about passion. Let's talk a minute about people. And the word here that I want to share with you is avodah. This is another Hebrew word. And the interesting thing about this one, it's the connection of work and service and worship. That there is something about when we work, we want to be serving others. We're wired to be connected people. We're wired for connection neurologically. And so this connection to people can be a way that we can really find abundance and fulfillment. So our daughter's high school teacher who teaches chemistry reminds me that all analogies fall apart. So with respect to Mr. Isengott, I'll be really careful and not take this analogy too far. Also, I know less than half enough to fill a thimble about chemistry, so this will be the extent of our chemistry lesson. The tiniest unit that we know about, one of the tiniest units we know about, is the atom. At the center of an atom is a proton and a neutron. They are in orbit together. The thing that keeps them in orbit together is something called binding force. Binding force is 6,000 billion times greater than gravity. Wow. So the tiniest thing that we know about isn't a thing at all. It's a relationship. So that, I think, is kind of a cool analogy for our importance of connections with people, in the importance of the gifts that we bring that help start to serve people. This is a photo I took in the south of France this summer when we were there with the family. And I think it's a little bit about our gifts and talents serving the common good. So Kuyper talks about this concept of serving the common good. And sunflowers are a really big deal in the south of France for the economy. Sunflower oil is sold. The beauty of sunflowers is everywhere. It's in the art. It's sold in stores. It's in places for free. Sunflowers are a beautiful part of the community and the society there. And I think it speaks to an obligation that we have. I think there's something about, you know that quote, from those to whom much is given, much is required? So we have this obligation, we have this incredible gifts, all of us with our own bucket of gifts that we have the obligation to give and about serving others. So the idea of abundance and fulfillment has to do with purpose. There's something greater than me that I care about. It's that I matter to that purpose. I'm expressing my passion toward that purpose, and that purpose has something to do with other people. It's not just some esoteric business goal like we're going to grow at 15% a year or we're going to be the #1 such and such in the year. Those are good things to sign up for as a good corporate citizen, but the things that will get our heart and that will help us feel fulfilled are the things that serve people. And so that's the idea with this one. So I think there's something about using your gifts and talents to serve others. And by the way, when people use their gifts and talents to serve others, statistically they are happier. There's another terrific book called Well-Being by Rath and Harder, and it really talks about our connectedness with each other and also the importance of serving others and doing good work and doing work well. And that when we do those things, we tend to be statistically happier and more satisfied. So I think it's about perspective, purpose, passion, and people. But now let me just tell you a minute about planting trees. A couple more points. Here's a wonderful quote from Tim Keller who talks about, in the beginning, God worked. I love that. So it's not about idolizing work, right? But it is about respecting work and the contributions we can all make. And this idea that there isn't necessarily a container for work and for life. That work is a part of life. It's part of a full life. It's part of a life of abundance and fulfillment. And this is Buckner's perspective. Our work is where our deep gladness and the world's hunger meet, where we can join that opportunity for our gifts and talents with those that are necessary in the world. So bringing work to life, I think, is about these things. This is a photo I took at the Grand Rapids Airport a week or so ago. It's the sunrise through that scaffolding. Oh, I thought that was kind of a fun vision for that morning as I was taking off. And I think the sunrise is something about this idea of purpose and passion and people. Through the scaffolding of work, we've all got this sort of structure to our lives and business results we need to drive and bottom lines that we need to pay attention to and strategy that we need to build and vision that we need to create and employees that we need to motivate. That is the scaffolding of our work for many of us. And the gifts and talents that we bring and the way that we connect to broader purpose and people, I think are that sunrise that come through that scaffolding. And some of the ways that we can begin to think about how we create abundance and fulfillment. So this is something that my friend Holly said to me years ago that has always stuck with me. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So I think there's something about taking action too, right? Like these are little things that we can do. And I think it's about growth. Like I don't think we figure out this thing once and we're done. I think it's a constant journey of creating and recreating, of discovering and rediscovering. And so that is for us as individuals. It's also for the people that we lead and the organizations that we influence to create abundance and fulfillment. And when we start with work-life integration instead of balance as the starting point, when we start with the idea that we can indeed have it all, this is the place where I think we can end up. So I started with my family, and let me end there as well. They are growing up, and they are growing taller, and they are precious. And it's just the start of a conversation, because we are all figuring it out together. So these are my coordinates for a continued conversation. And I'm super glad to take any questions that you have.
Tracy, we want to thank you for speaking with us today, and in honor of your time here, we're also going to be offering a business scholarship to a student next year to thank you for talking to this crowd today, so thank you very much.
Awesome.
So
thank you.
we do have some time for questions and answers, so if there are, I think there are a couple folks with microphones in the room, so if anybody has a question, feel free to raise your hand and we will get a microphone to you so everyone can hear it. So who has the first question? There.
What is your favorite word and why?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard question. You know what? I was actually an English major in my undergrad. I know, I probably shouldn't even tell you this. I'm so tempted. I have to tell you though. So I graduated from Hope College. I know. So this is where you're like looking for the tomatoes that they might have already cleared off the table. So I'm a huge fan of Calvin and actually thrilled that you'll have me as a Hope grad. And I was actually an English major at Hope because I loved the English language and English words so much. So I don't know, there are so many good ones. These are some of my favorites, actually. There are a couple interesting ones that I learned recently. I learned one this morning called chiasmus. Chiasmus is one of those funny phrases that turns in on itself. So when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That's an example of chiasmus. I think that's kind of interesting because when things turn in on themselves, it allows us reflection, it allows us to think about our thinking, it allows us to think twice and reflect again on why we do what we do, which is, I think, where learning happens. So you've really put me on the spot with that one. I hope that was okay. Any other questions? This one way over here.
I'll speak about what are the components of workplace vitality at Mars Drinks?
Great question. Yeah, oh my gosh. So I'm at Mars Drinks, which is part of Mars Incorporated, and an incredible, incredible organization. I'm just utterly delighted and humbled to have joined that organization. And we just did this great research on workplace vitality, which is going to be going public soon. Workplace vitality is essentially the intersection of engagement, collaboration, well-being, and productivity. So lots and lots more to come on that. We've got white papers we're launching and actually a bit of a media tour that we're launching, which will give lots more detail. There'll be things that you can download from the website. And then we're launching a lot of additional research as well around neuroscience. We're going to be working with a CAP group. I'm so excited to work with Bob and his students again around a generational perspective of workplace vitality. We're looking at indicators of workplace vitality and the effects and drivers of workplace vitality as it relates to the physical environment and to drinks. So there's just an incredible amount there. The important thing about workplace vitality, I think, is what we end up doing about it, right? So it's the what of workplace vitality and understanding it deeply, and the so what as business leaders. How do we create that kind of thing in our organizations? How do we create organizations where people can bring all of themselves to the work environment so that they can be their best? So thank you for asking. Other questions? All right.
All right.
Sounds
well,
good.
let's thank Tracy
Thank
for
you.
speaking with us today.